to disappear from the screen, and I'll give you guys a countdown in just a moment. Okay, so in 3, 2, and 1.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us to discuss the Paycheck Protection Program, how it's worked here in New Hampshire, and our economic recovery from the COVID shutdown / slowdown that hopefully now is beginning to turn back around to a more robust economy with more people participating. But we are focused today on this Paycheck Protection Program that came from the CARES Act in Congress. We were very fortunate here in New Hampshire to have our New Hampshire banks step up and participate in a quick turnaround in this program. And we were able to make more than 24,000 PPP loans right here to small businesses all across the state. And we brought in over $2.5 billion in federal funds directly to New Hampshire businesses to protect payroll, to keep people on the job, even for businesses that were shut down during the COVID outbreak. We also had the IEDL program, resulting in over 10,000 loans to larger Main Street type businesses, and that accounted for $650 million additional dollars flowing to the state. So I've been hearing from businesses. My staff and I took many inquiries. We had a lot of conversation on our telephone town halls with Representative Chris Pappas about both the PPP and the EIDL loans. And some had issues with the application process, but for many, we were able to get those issues resolved, and we've had a really successful experience with this program. I obviously was a strong supporter of the CARES Act and providing relief both for the PPP and the Main Street Relief Fund, as well as the Self-Employed Livelihood Fund and the GAP Fund. So all providing grant funding to Granite State businesses, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. I also was proud to take the vote in the House on the HEROES Act, which is the second round of economic stimulus that's now being negotiated with the Senate to provide greater flexibility to use the PPP and to increase funding for the EIDL program. And we hope that this will provide more funding to the state of New Hampshire to continue our successful economic recovery. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by both the state actors, the bank actors that were helpful, and several small businesses to tell us their personal story. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Thomas, who's with us from the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. Sean, thank you for being with us. I know this is a busy time for you, but I appreciate your willingness to share the experience. We worked very well, I think, the federal delegation and the Governor's Office behind the scenes to try to work out some of the kinks in the programs. But just give us a sense of where we are now and where we expect this will go in the coming months.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate. Again, my name is Sean Thomas. I'm currently working with GOFR, the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. GOFR is charged with administering the New Hampshire portion of the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund money, the $1.25 billion. And I was asked to give a brief overview of the three general small business-focused state-administered programs: the Main Street Relief Fund program, the SELF program, that's the Self-Employed Livelihood Fund program, and the GAP Fund, which we call the General Assistance and Preservation Fund program. So I guess I'll just do that. I'll do a brief overview, and I'll start at the beginning. It started first with the Main Street Relief Fund program. And really the goal from the start was to come up with a a simple solution that could meaningfully help as many New Hampshire-based businesses as possible, and really to do it quickly while also protecting against fraud, waste, and abuse. So not easy. You have a few things there that kind of work against each other. So I think early on, it was important, we thought, to gather information. We didn't really want to come up with a solution blind. And so if you are familiar at all with the Main Street Relief Fund program, you'll remember that it had two phases. The first phase was the pre-qualification phase. This was mandatory if you wanted to later apply to the program, but it was also how we gathered information that we needed to make decisions about appropriate program requirements and details. Basically, we were asking ourselves, how much should we allocate? How much do we need to meaningfully help as many businesses as possible, and to do it now when they need it the most? And so the pre-qual really helped us answer some of these questions and really set the stage for Main Street, but also for the programs that came later, Self and Gap. So the pre-qual phase ran for 2 weeks and was followed almost immediately by what we call the final submission phase, which was a 1-week application period. The end result of the program, all things said and done, almost 5,400 businesses received over $342 million. The average grant award across these 5,400 businesses was about $63,500. So not a small amount of money. We're hopeful this is a number that really made a difference. I can tell you that this average grant amount, the average being $63,500, is considerably more than even the maximum grants allowed under similar programs in other states. So, I mean, we were really able to do this, I think, for two reasons. One, being the New Hampshire portion of the Coronavirus Relief Fund, that being at $1.25 billion, and also gathering that information during the pre-qualification phase, I think gave the governor the information he needed to allocate $400 million to this program. So for small business relief, so a huge amount of money there. And again, this all happened really fast. The final submission deadline was June 12th, and the first round of checks, over 5,000 checks of those 5,400 checks in total, really, they went out, they were processed in the first week. So things moved very, very quickly. After Main Street came Self. A little background on Self. We found out through Main Street, there was a little more than 2,000 self-employed businesses. And by self-employed, we mean businesses with owners and no employees. So there was a little more than 2,000 self-employed businesses that applied for Main Street, but were denied because they were ineligible. And that was consistent with the Main Street program criteria. Self-employed businesses were not eligible. And there was also a separate pool of over 2,700 of these self-employed businesses that had filed the pre-qual application, but not the final submission, likely because they were ineligible. So this was a large group of businesses that still needed help. They were initially excluded, with the idea being the owners of these businesses were eligible for and receiving expanded unemployment benefits. But we ended up hearing from a number of these businesses and came to realize that they needed additional business-specific relief. And so that's really the impetus for the Self program. Excuse me. If you remember, $400 million was allocated to the Main Street program. This was not entirely expended because the Main Street program had a maximum grant cap. So the remaining money there, the money that was left over, was reallocated to the Self program. And the Self program operated almost exactly like Main Street, but without a pre-qual, because based on the Main Street pre-qualification, I'm sorry, I keep saying pre-qual, but I mean pre-qualification, because based on the Main Street pre-qualification as well as the final submission, we really had a good sense of these businesses already, and so didn't need to do that again. We thought one application period was sufficient. So Self had a single 2-week application period. It ended about a month ago. I can tell you so far, there's been over 4,400 businesses that have received grants through the Self program, totaling over $33 million. And that number will continue to increase. There's already additional businesses that have been approved, but they will receive payment soon. And there's more still under review. So that process is still ongoing. But again, much like Main Street, things are moving fast. The first 3,400 checks Really, we're out in the first 1.5 weeks, but that review process continues and more checks will keep going out. The third program, the GAP program, this is the program that's still ongoing as well. The application period just recently wrapped up. That ended last week. It ran for a little over 2 weeks. So it just for clarity purposes, Main Street itself are being administered primarily by the Department of Revenue Administration. The GAP fund is being administered by the Business Finance Authority. And so they received about another 600 applications. The GAP fund has $30 million. It was intended, really like its name, to fill in the gaps, to help those businesses that didn't receive other relief funded, whether it be through Main Street or some other program. And so the review process is underway, and we expect that it will be completed this month. So those are really three programs: general business, small business specific programs, helping over 10,000 businesses, about $400 million, and really all over 3 months. And so, and that doesn't include some other state administered programs providing relief to more specific business types. For instance, the Healthcare Relief Fund, which is another $100 million. There's a farm program, nonprofit. So all these programs are helping businesses. And so we are hopeful this really makes a difference, helps New Hampshire businesses through these difficult and uncertain times, and that helps preserve the New Hampshire advantage during and long after the pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. That was very, very helpful. And I think you and your team are to be commended for the speed that, you know, in the normal course, if you started something like this, you'd probably take many months to put it together. But I think the urgency really, and I know certainly for Congress, one of the reasons that we've had to go back and make some adjustments is that we were just moving so quickly back in March, realizing what the extent of the shutdown, what the impact was going to be. So thank you for that. Well, we're delighted to have Christy Merrill with us, who's the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Bankers Association. And I think one of the really positive outcomes of this is how well our business community, our banking community stepped up and worked together in this public-private partnership with the state and the federal funding to really bring these results very, very quickly. And the whole goal from the beginning we had was to maintain payroll, knowing that businesses were either going to shut down or slow down, to try to keep people on payroll, keep them connected to their health insurance, connected to their business, because we all knew that there would come a time when people would be able to go back in and reopen, and we didn't want massive unemployment across the board. So Christy, thanks for being with us. And if you just want to unmute and comment on what this has been like for the Bankers Association.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman. We really appreciate your support throughout all of this. And the communication from your office has really been terrific. So we thank you for your support and for the communication throughout this time period. It's certainly been challenging. You know, at the start of the shutdown, you know, banks were obviously very nervous, and they started reaching out to their customers proactively to see how they can help. You know, they called customers and said, how you doing? Do you need to have your loans modified? And so when the PPP was passed very quickly, I think that was a natural extension of how another way they could help their customers. And as Congresswoman Kuster said, you know, I was really happy about the level of participation by banks in New Hampshire. Even before all the details were released on how this program was going to work, they all said, yes, we're going to participate. I think we had one of our member banks not participate, and that's simply because they don't do commercial lending, so they're not equipped, they don't have the manpower, so they weren't able to participate, but all the other banks did. And the Congresswoman spoke about how many PPP loans were administered here. You know, she talked about 2.5 billion. That's a really big number, and of that represented 170,000 jobs by our members that helped support these small businesses. And so this was really significant. So the participation by our banks was really, it was pretty impressive. And as the banks jumped in, if you'll recall, the program was first come, first serve. So as it started, there was a real fear about not having the information to take care of their customers and not having the funding. And so I think earlier when this was announced, I think the application was put online. And that application was put online even before the banks knew how to process the loans. So they were really worried. And I had banks telling me that I think the eTran portal, and that's the portal that uploaded the loans to the SBA for the PPP. I had banks tell me they were online at midnight when they opened because they wanted to be the first to take care of their customers, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't run out of funds. So, there definitely was a scramble in the beginning, and there was, like I said, there was a fear that the funds were going to run out, and they did. And fortunately, Congress reacted quickly, and they reauthorized a second round of funding. But, it was difficult because they were trying to figure out the rules as they went along. It certainly was imperfect, but I think I really applaud Congress for acting so quickly, and the SBA for putting it together quickly. I think anyone that's going to move that quickly on a program that large, they're going to experience some pain points. And so there certainly were. And, having the change in guidance, the rules were changing on the bankers was also a kind of, it was a source of frustration, but I think just as a result of that. But, the thing that was remarkable about it is the banks were working remotely like everybody else. So all of these loans, all these things that are being processed are doing them from bankers at home that, they're trying to figure it out like they are too. They're trying to do the e-signature thing, and they can't print like they used to. So that's kind of an overview of what the experience has been like. And, today, I think as the banks try and figure out the forgiveness portion, there's still a lot of confusion about that. That seems to be going relatively slowly. I know a lot of folks are waiting to see if Congress is able to pass streamlined forgiveness. In New Hampshire, 85% of all of our PPP loans are less than $150,000. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that's a really big number, and it kind of gives some scale as to the businesses that are impacted. So if we're able to have, one-page forgiveness, we think that's going to be a huge relief to our small businesses, and we think it's going to help the SBA as well with their workload, because we know it's significant, and obviously the banks they would like to see that as well. So we appreciate your support of that, Congresswoman Kuster.
And I'm signed on to that bill now, and we'll continue to push for that because, there's no reason for everybody to be mired down in paperwork. The point was to keep these funds flowing, keep these businesses open. Let's let them move on and focus on their marketing and responding. They've got additional expenses, just even the hygiene and the cleaning and all of that. So let's just get people back in business.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Well, Chrissy, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. And now I want to turn it over to Reggie Green from Claremont Savings Bank to give us a sense, Reggie, I remember the conversation I had with the bankers very early on. We didn't know what the terms were going to be. Everybody was scrambling. There was one particular weekend where everybody was working around the clock to try to prepare for the onslaught. How has this been for Claremont Savings Bank, and where do you see things now, and where do you expect to be in the next several months?
So we were, it actually went pretty well for us. The first round, we were ready. We were one of the banks, we're a fairly small bank, so we didn't buy in a software. A lot of banks that tried to do it with software got into trouble because the systems didn't work and you had to move so quickly. So we had people that were working through the weekends and late at night that were processing applications. So we handled almost everything that we needed to in the first round. We did about $17 million worth of loans, maybe 200 loans altogether, which isn't a huge number, but for us it is. It was a lot of work.
Still a lot of paperwork.
And we really felt like we were helping out our customers. We also got an opportunity to provide loans for some large businesses in town that were not our customers, but whose banks either weren't participating in the program or were more national banks that just weren't ready. So that was nice. So we were able to
Oh,
establish
that's
newer.
great. That's a new relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll get a chance to talk to them in the future. So that went very well. I want to add on to what Christy was saying about the number of loans that were under 150,000. For us, it was 88%, but it was only 36% of the dollars. So if the government's or the SBA's concerned about being able to look at them closely, make sure they were done properly, most of the dollars would still be covered. But the small loans are, most of the loans, but really not a lot of the dollars, less than half of the dollars.
That's very helpful. And I think that's important for taxpayers and my constituents as well, because one thing I know about frugal Yankees here in New Hampshire, they want to make sure that every tax dollar is spent very, very wisely. And so that's good to know that even if we streamline the paperwork for the loans under $150,000, that most of the tax dollars flowing to the large loans would still be scrutinized very carefully. And that's good to know.
That's right.
Thank you.
And the comments about the guidance were all true. It was changing all the time. And we're still getting that with the forgiveness. We're hoping we already have a couple of applications for forgiveness, but we don't want to work too hard because we want to see if something gets passed to make it easier for a lot of the loans.
Good.
So we're expecting to be working on this probably through the rest of the year, and appreciate the new guidance that comes out and any help. So thank you very much for supporting that bill.
Excellent, thank you. And just a sense of the economy in Claremont, what's your feel for it? Do you feel as though people are back at work? And also my concern, I know for the people that were furloughed, many of them did rely on unemployment and the supplemental unemployment from the federal government, and then the direct payments, stimulus payments. But do you have a sense that that was sufficient to tide people over? Or what I had voted for is to continue that for the people who are out of work. You can't, by the way, just to correct some misunderstanding, you cannot quit your job and get unemployment. Unemployment is if you were furloughed or if your business is not open,
Right.
where you work. So what's your sense of that?
So it's interesting. So we ended up deferring a lot of mortgage loans because people were concerned about they were either laid off. So we deferred about 2 to 3% of our loans, which is much less than the national average of 7 or 8%. So that felt good. And after the 90 days is up, which is right about now, we have very few that are continuing in deferment. So people are back making their loan payments.
Good.
That's
a very good sign.
We are concerned that after the stimulus is over, that reality will hit. And if the employment rate is a lot higher, I mean, we have some businesses laying off and some businesses that are dying to get new people. So we've got both ends of the spectrum. So I think the employment around here should be okay. We have about a quarter of our commercial loans in deferment, and that's concerning because I think the businesses are really the ones that are struggling, and they're getting help in the short term, again, thanks to some of these programs. But in the long term, it will be interesting. We are planning for some credit issues. We hope they don't come to pass. But the support has been good. It is delaying, I think, what could be a little worse situation.
Yeah, and I was talking with a group of mayors the other day. It's interesting. They had anticipated that people would not be able to pay property taxes, but similar to what you've just described, that was only in the 2 to 3% range. So I think that is a reflection that unemployment helped people through to continue paying their mortgage, paying their taxes. But what people are concerned about is the next 6 months. And part of it, we're starting to hear from some of the big manufacturers that kept going on orders that they had, but now are starting to feel a slowdown of orders based upon the supply chain issues in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So we're not quite out of the woods in terms of what we need to anticipate in the next 6 months, and also obviously keeping a very close eye health-wise on keeping these low infection rates in New Hampshire. Particularly, I was talking yesterday to the college presidents. Students are coming back, but they're only coming back until Thanksgiving, and they're not going to be on campus from Thanksgiving till February because of the flu season. People are very concerned about COVID coming back during the flu season and the complications there. So we're still having to stay very attentive, but thank you. That was interesting and very helpful. So now we have with us 3 small businesses that did use these programs, the PPP loans, and some that used other loans as well. Let's start with Jeff Barrett from the Ink Factory. Jeff, love your t-shirt. Thanks for being with us. Tell us a little bit about your business and how this all worked out for you.
So we are we're an apparel decorator in Claremont. We also do signs and vehicle graphics and that type of thing. So we're very, very heavily reliant on small businesses as customers. And we do events and all kinds of things. And overnight we lost about 35% of our business.
Wow.
Just when everything shut down, between schools, events that were canceled, sports seasons, summer camps, all of that stuff. We were fortunate in that although our work dried up, what the PPP did for us was allow us to bring everybody, we let everybody off. But as soon as that money came in, we were able to hire everybody back, start marketing, start really doing some marketing, really start doing some sales. And to date, we're only down about 5% for the year.
Wow. What
yeah,
a great story.
Really, really, really happy.
That's fantastic.
And so without that, we definitely couldn't be where we are. We have yet to file for forgiveness because I was really, really hoping it was going to get easier.
Yeah.
The paperwork trail was going to get easier. So, but Claremont Savings Bank was extremely responsive with us. And we own 2 businesses under one roof here in Claremont, and we used PPP for both. And again, it was kind of the same situation where I was able to retain people to do kind of really positive, forward-thinking things to be able to kind of pivot and find new business for us. So
good for you. I think it's that entrepreneurial spirit that's going to carry people through. I think the hard part, as Reggie alluded to, there are going to be winners and losers in the post-COVID economy. And some things in our lives will be different, that I think the telework, the telehealth, the teleeducation is with us to stay. We're working very hard on expanded broadband, particularly rural broadband, to make sure that everybody can participate in this economy with get so many of us working at home. But then there are other things that I think could come back stronger, and I think for you to stay nimble and stay ahead of it and be thinking about the marketing and thinking about staying ahead of it is really important. So good luck to you. I'm glad to hear your story, and definitely glad that Congress was able to react quickly. It's businesses like yours that we're trying to keep alive, and your employees, keep them employed. People would much rather, I know this about New Hampshire people, we'd much rather be working and taking care of our families. So good luck to you. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Good. Cheryl Lawson from Lawson Group here in the Capital Region. Cheryl, you want to tell us a little bit about your business, Lawson Group, and how the loan programs worked out for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm currently outside with my family on a hike, so hence the background.
No worries at all. I'm happy you're outside with your kids on a hike.
That's what's in the box, right?
Yeah. But just a huge thank you. Huge thank you to your office. Huge thank you to Christy with the Bankers Association. She couldn't have explained it better. So the Lawson Group, 80% of what we do is we manage 4 of the state's self-insured workers' compensation trusts. And we handle the manufacturers, we handle the lumber industry and healthcare. And I can definitely speak to the comments you made. They're all working, they're strong. We haven't seen many members. We manage a comp for over 400 businesses. We haven't seen many furloughs and layoffs in those sectors. And we've been very grateful for that. The other lines of our business are health and safety consulting. Our revenue's off about 50% for people delaying or postponing work, and that was to be expected. My challenge was at the very beginning of the PPP process. We had a local bank. We work with Merrimack Savings Bank, and it was great because we had all of our documentation ready to go the day before the application process actually opened. And when I submitted everything to our banker, he was surprised that we had everything in such detail and to him quickly. But we were stuck. The portal you were referring to, he couldn't get through it. So I submitted everything. I figured we're set, we're good. And I get an email back middle of the day that says something's wrong. I can't process your application. And anybody that knows me, I have some control issues.
Yes.
So I'm sitting in
very organized.
I'm sitting in my office. I can't go see my local banker because of COVID. He, like Chrissy described, is trying to process hundreds and hundreds of applications. So I just sat there, without explanation for a few hours. He kept trying, nothing could get through. The portal wasn't accepting our application. He finally said to me, you need to reach out to the SBA locally. So I Googled and I found the right people and I reached out and they were tremendous. And they tried. And after I was getting emails at midnight. It wouldn't stop. And about 4 days later, the local SBA office said, we can't do anything. We are inundated with volume. We have no additional resources. The only thing I can say is try and reach out through Congress. And I am grateful for the state of New Hampshire. It's a small state. Those of us come together, working through the BIA, through our local constituents. I reached out to your office and I just explained what was going on. I was told that somewhere in the SBA system, 15 years ago, the company had applied for a loan through the CDRC to build the building we're in, and something was input incorrectly. I don't know what it was. It was a number, It could be a tax ID. It was something was input that it wasn't matching our data. And I got an email from the SBA locally that said, you are one of 5 that have just been fast-tracked to Washington. We have no idea what you did. And then I got Tom Dustin, who called me from the bank and said, I don't know who you called, but you just got approved. Not approved for the loan, but the application actually said submit and accepted. And it was just the most frustrating process because we did everything we were supposed to.
Yeah.
And initially people said to me, Cheryl, don't worry about it, there's plenty of money and there's plenty of time. Well, we came to see in the first round there wasn't plenty of money and there wasn't plenty of time. So I am grateful we have not had to lay off any of our 40 employees. We're hopeful to stem the tides through this, but I can't thank the Banking Association and my banker more than I'm so grateful to be here in New Hampshire in the small state we're in with the connection we all have. And I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. Everything is great. And I too, like the gentleman before me, I'm not submitting for the package for the forgiveness yet. I'm waiting till it gets simple and someone finally tells me, here's what you have to do. So we're keeping our records, we're doing what we're supposed to. And you are correct that manufacturing is concerned about the next several months because while they have had tremendous backlogs, their orders that are coming in are fewer than they had. So we'll see what the fall brings us.
Yeah. Well, what an incredible story. So here's a funny small world story for you in terms of New Hampshire. I grew up with Tommy Dustin.
Okay.
I went to school with him. He was good friend of mine in high school. So at Concord High School. So that's a funny story. But thank you for being persistent, and I'm proud of my team for being helpful. We do have Tom Giancarlo is with us as well from our office down in Nashua.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that. One of the things that happens, and I do think this is part of our new normal, both before COVID, but certainly after COVID, because so much is happening online and it's not happening in those person to person. Merrimack County Savings Bank is my bank as well, and you would just go in and sit down and somebody would straighten out any kind of glitch. And I know this has become more difficult for people in the sense that one little teeny thing. My husband and I were doing some banking the other day, and it took forever. We couldn't figure out what the problem was, and finally I got through on the phone. It's so hard to get through now. And then somebody said, "Oh, it's because of your name." And I have a lot of names: Ann McLean Kuster, Annie Kuster, Ann Kuster, and the computer can't handle that. You can
Right.
only have one name. And I'm talking to this person, I'm saying, okay, every woman in America has this problem. Like, how do you not adjust for this problem? So I feel your pain about having one digit wrong. And I'm just happy for you that it got squared away. And congratulations, keeping 40 people on the payroll is a big accomplishment. And we certainly appreciate it. The ripple effect, those people all being able to continue to pay their mortgage, to continue to pay their property taxes, and with everybody's working from home. They've got kids that aren't in school. They're teaching from home, and just incredible that this all worked out. So thank you, Cheryl, for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Michael Herman, my dear friend and bookstore, Gibson's Bookstore on Main Street. So many happy memories there, including, not to be partisan in any way, but the visit with Kamala Harris to Gibson's Bookstore, and here she is running for Vice President of the United States. So Michael, tell us your experience with the PPP and just how this has all worked out for you.
Sure. Well, Gibson's is the oldest bookstore in New Hampshire. We were founded in 1898, and I've owned it since 1994. And, bookstores are used to times of no money, but we've never seen anything like this. We started out great this year. January and February were both record breakers for our store, but then COVID hit in March, and we closed in mid-March. And we were so grateful that the PPP funds were made available right away. We essentially just used that as a pass-through. We kept all of our employees. We didn't lay anybody off, and we spent 8 weeks based on the original guidance. We kept them at their original pay levels for 8 weeks. Then after that, we entered the state's work share program, which was a godsend also, because we were only doing like 60 or 65% of our normal sales after about March 15th. And so we had to cut payroll, and the work share program, which is part of the unemployment system, enabled us to pay people at like 60, 70, 80% of their normal pay. And their paychecks would be supplemented through the unemployment system. So the work share program, which was created after the 2008 recession, was very helpful for us. I think that the emphasis on paycheck protection at first was the right decision to make, but moving forward and in the long term, there's a lot of just straight working capital needs, which include payroll, but also includes things like paying your rent, paying your debts, paying vendors, preparing for the holiday season. That was the point of the Main Street Relief Program, for which that was like magic, I have to say. The Main Street Relief Program, the pre-qualification period was quick, and the checks came a couple of weeks later, and I was extremely impressed with how well that worked. It was a lot more streamlined than the PPP program has been, which the guidance has changed a couple of times, and we're just waiting for Merrimack County Savings Bank to tell us how to apply for forgiveness. We're not even looking at that until they say go. There's a real New Hampshire advantage with smaller banks, small local and regional banks, because you know your banker, and they know you, and they go to bat for you, and they tell you what to do and when to do it. So there's a real New Hampshire advantage, as they say. We're worried about Christmas. I have to say that,
Yeah.
speaking on behalf of some of the retail community, I think a lot of us depend on the fourth quarter for significant revenue increases and cash flow. And we've been on Zoom calls with a lot of different bookstores around the country, from large and small, and we're all trying to figure out ways to extend the holiday season and get people to shop early. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, and that's why we're especially concerned that there should be another wave of support for working capital, because I mean, like I said, the first emphasis was correct with paycheck protection, but we also have to protect our landlords. We have to protect our landlords' banks. We have to maintain liquidity throughout the system, both up and down and in both directions, or else we're going to have much bigger problems with the economy. So we really are fervently wishing for another round of support from the government.
And I think that's this Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act addresses all of that. First of all, it extends to December 31, the whole program, but also it increases the limitation on the use of loan proceeds for non-payroll expenses from 25 up to 40%. So everything that you've talked about, utilities and rent and mortgage payments.
I agree with that. By the time that happened, we had already spent the money on payroll.
Right, and that's the problem, is that another round,
Right.
that going forward, another round of this.
Yeah.
And extending the loan term from 2 years to 5 years. So, spreading out, if you don't get the total loan forgiveness, spreading out. So I think that's part of what we're focused on, is bringing flexibility to the program. But I'm really pleased here in New Hampshire that this funding, this total 1.25 billion funding, was able, to go through these iterations that Sean described of the Main Street loans, and then the self-employed loans, and then the GAP funding, and all these different ways of getting at it. In terms of Christmas, and I think you raised a really good point. I mean, I hope that people are reading a lot more. I know that I am. Just that, your options for entertainment are more limited, but in a nice way, that people are spending more time with families. But the other thing I think is that we don't know what we're headed into. It's so beautiful here in New Hampshire now. I love that that she was joining us from a hike with her kids, and that people are outdoors. But I have a feeling that Christmas is going to be very, very big, the holiday season generally for people, whatever your holidays that you're celebrating. And I think partly those holidays come at a time when our forebears were really wanting something to celebrate. We may end up feeling the same way, because dealing with all of this without the outdoor time and the long days and the sunshine, we're going to be needing something to cheer us up. Well, listen, thank you everyone for being with us. I really appreciate your time. If there are any questions or thoughts or closing comments, we'll welcome them now. But otherwise, thank you, Christy, for being with us, and to the bankers, Reggie, for all that you've done in your community. Sean, thanks to the state and the governor's office for stepping up, and good luck to your companies, small businesses, keeping people employed and keeping our economy strong. So thanks for being with us, everyone. Stay safe, be good, and wear your mask when you go out. I'm like everybody's mother. Take care. Thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Alrighty, good. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.